Veterans Memorial, I-55 to St. Charles, the Army Trail Toll to 290. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center and meteorologist Steve Williams.
Clouds and chilly this morning. See some sun a little bit later on, but a shower in spots this afternoon, high 50. Partly cloudy, brisk and cold tonight, low 30. And then intervals of clouds and sun, a cold day tomorrow, the high at 42. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
45 at O'Hare, next news 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't miss the ammo event this weekend at Shoot Point Blank. Pick up great deals on ammo, like 50 rounds of 9mm as low as $10.99 per box. The more ammo you buy, the more you save. Load up this weekend at Shoot Point Blank's ammo event. See store for details.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. It's that time again. Time to do some more ciphering of the latest impeachment hermeneutics coming from Sunday's talk shows. Clinton Foundation Donor Zero on ABC with Steve Scalise, House Minority Whip. And of course, the question he asked starts from a premise that Republicans reject. Is it appropriate for the president to ask a foreign leader to dig up dirt on a political rival? That presupposes that that's what President Trump did. That's one of several competing interpretations of the now biblical transcript between Trump and Zelensky.
Do you have it memorized yet?
Scalise offered this in response.
Well, first of all, on that call, he was not talking about the 2020 election or political opponents. He was talking about corruption relating to the 2016 election.
That's not what the transcript shows.
When Russia tried to interfere, George, when Russia tried to interfere with our election, it was Barack Obama who was president, not Donald Trump. President Trump has a legal requirement to ensure that the country given foreign aid, in this case Ukraine, is taking steps to root out corruption. And he and President Zelensky talked about that.
I got to say, hours of watching this stuff over the weekend and over the many weeks, it seems this has gone on.
What week are we on? It feels longer than the CPS strike at this point.
Well, it's much longer than that, and it's going to be much longer still. Jackie Speier was on Face the Nation. She's Democrat on House Intel, California. She did give a little bit of a timeline, if Democrats hew to it, which is transcripts and public hearings could start as soon as the week after this.
We have one more week of interviews that will take place, and then I'm pretty confident we're going to move into a public hearing setting in which the House Intelligence Committee, along with the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Oversight Committees, will start to place in the public's hands the information. I also think the transcripts are going to start to be released next week, and that's going to give the American people an eye on exactly what we have heard.
Look forward to that. I'm probably looking forward to it more than Tom Cole, who offered a nice summary of his impressions of the last several weeks on Meet the Press in 10 seconds or less.
And I look at it this way. The aid is there, and the investigations didn't happen. So if there was a quid pro quo, it certainly wasn't a very effective one.
Can you be impeached for an attempted quid pro quo? One might ask. Why don't we discuss that with Quin Hillyer? He's a contributing editor, National Review Magazine, senior editor for the American Spectator, and commentary writer for Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. Quin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Glad to be on with you and Amy.
What about what Representative Cole said there? All this back and forth, was it or wasn't it? Here's what we know. We know that the aid is there and the investigation didn't happen. So what are we talking about here?
We are talking about an attempted abuse of power. That's what we're talking about. We are talking, and a rather serious attempted abuse of power. We are talking about an abuse of power that actually was not just attempted, but was partially successful. The aid was was withheld for some 2 or 3 months, during which all sorts of really bad things could have happened. We're lucky they didn't. And we are definitely talking about an abuse of the process. The question is what rises to the level of, or sinks to the level of an impeachable and removable offense. But clearly there was stuff that happened that the President of the United States should not have done.
Well, okay. However, with respect to mentioning Joe Biden, which is what I presume you're talking about, I mean, does running for president absolve you of investigative scrutiny? Because it's in the two parts of the transcript where Biden is mentioned, isn't it in reference to the investigation ongoing into 2016? To wit,
no.
In both instances, he references Zelensky, asking Zelensky to cooperate with the Attorney General of the United States.
No, he offers the Attorney General to help Zelensky. Here's the key, and it is a very important key. There was not an open investigation into the Bidens in the United States. There was no specific crime alleged against the Bidens in the United States. And we can, if there is an ongoing investigation that involve in the United States that a foreign government might be able to assist with, that's one thing. We have treaties asking them for that. We do not have any treaties saying we can't find anything on these guys, so we want you to go do it. And that's what happened here. Look, I've written a column. What Hunter Biden did, trading on his father's name, was sleazy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sleazy does not necessarily mean it was a crime.
Right.
And to go after a U.S. citizen, to sic any foreign government on a U.S. citizen when there's no U.S. investigation into that citizen, much less a political rival, that is wrong. It's just flat out wrong. It has never happened before, as far as anybody can tell. People have done the research. We can't find any other example of it, so it was wrong.
You can't find
was it criminal?
You can't find any other example of what exactly? Of
a U.S. president trying to sic a foreign government on an American citizen to open an investigation into a U.S. citizen when there is no alleged U.S. crime. Period.
Well, we don't have transcripts of phone calls that President Obama might have had, or the Bushes. I mean,
well, there is no known instance of it. There was no in this case. There were three, count them, at least three different people that listened to that phone call that made criminal referrals to the Justice Department because they thought something criminal had been done. That has never happened before, as far as we know.
But the problem with some of those individuals is their particular perspectives potentially on the president, starting with the whistleblower, if you assume that the report by Paul Sperry last week is accurate, which I do. And even Vindman, who testified again, the reporting we have, because we don't have transcripts, I hope Jackie Spire's right, and we'll get him next week, where Vindman allegedly said that he was concerned about President Trump's effort to subvert foreign policy. Well, excuse me, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. Who are you to determine what U.S. foreign policy is? That's actually the job of the Commander-in-Chief, as I understand it from the Constitution.
Well, actually, in this case, what he's talking about is actual U.S. law, which was aid to Ukraine that had been passed by Congress and signed into law. That makes it U.S. law, and that makes it above the President of the United States, not below the President of the United States.
But is Representative Scalise right to suggest, would the President be right to ask that before we give aid to a country, particularly military aid, it is entirely legitimate for the President of the United States to inquire about concerns of corruption in his country with a history of corruption?
But that's not what Trump was doing.
Well,
that's not what Trump was doing.
That's what Scalise says he was doing, so that's one interpretation of what Trump was doing. That's the House Minority Whip saying it.
No, look, I've known Steve Scalise since 1989. I've been a huge supporter of his for years. I've never been more disgusted with him.
Okay.
There is absolutely no evidence that Donald Trump has pressed Ukraine or any other government, with the possible exception of Mexico and their drug problem, any other foreign government on any issue of corruption other than the two issues that involve him politically. And he did not ask Ukraine to clean up any of its other corruption. The only corruption, the supposed corruption that he asked them to look into, was a totally debunked, crazy conspiracy theory about 2016, saying that Ukraine held some servers which were owned by a Russian American in California, not by anybody in Ukraine, and to go after the Bidens on something where there is no alleged U.S. law that the Bidens have broken. Meanwhile, there was actually an attempt to, or actually passage of aid to Ukraine to fight corruption, actual U.S. financial assistance to fight corruption, and Trump nixed it. So if Trump is interested in Ukrainian corruption, why is it that the only Ukrainian corruption that he is interested in is the two things that might help him politically, but he's not interested in following the recommendations of anybody to actually give them money to fight any other corruption?
Well, I mean,
it doesn't make sense.
That's a fair question, but there's all sorts of competing concerns on these matters. I mean, you would ask the same question of why you could ask a similar question in terms of why the Obama administration was so reluctant to do what the Trump administration has done and provide this military support to Ukraine, despite the bipartisan support to do so. Right? I mean, that's
well in. And
one more point, sir, and then I'll let you. And then you also have the Politico's report of Ukrainian actors potentially involved in trying to interfere with the election in 2016 for the benefit of Hillary Clinton. So you have that additional layer to it.
Right, but Trump didn't ask about that. Trump asked specifically about this crazy crackpot conspiracy theory about the CrowdStrike server.
I know.
Which has nothing to do with anything. Let me say this. He has his Attorney General, Bill Barr, out there investigating all of the Hillary Clinton angle for the 2016 election, all of the supposed corruption that started the Russia investigation on behalf of the Democrats. So he's got Barr investigating all that. If Ukraine was central to that, why is it that Barr has personally spoken to government officials in Australia, in Great Britain, and in Italy, but he hasn't talked to any officials in Ukraine? Why is that? Because they are not central to it. There was a minor Ukrainian aspect to it, not even enough for Trump's own bulldog, Bill Barr, to even bother with yet. When it came out that Trump and his people were pushing for this investigation in Ukraine, the Justice Department about 2 weeks ago put out a statement saying we know nothing about any U.S. investigation into Ukraine.
Right.
Period.
That was news to us, is what they. Right. I remember that. Okay.
Exactly. So Trump is making stuff up and trying to sick a foreign government on a U.S. citizen who is his chief political rival based on nothing.
So I know you wrote in the Examiner that you favor an impeachment inquiry, and you actually suggested that, the entire Republican caucus, since they all voted against it, are shameless to vote against the impeachment inquiry, except that you also suggested the resolution that was voted up on Thursday is shameless as well. So how should this flesh out, I guess, is my question.
Okay, well, and see, what I'm doing is I'm trying to take the names and the parties out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Forget that it's Trump. Forget that it's Republicans, or forget that it's Democrats. If you were presented with these facts and these circumstances, regardless of party, just in a political vacuum, how would you act? What would you say is right, and what would you say is wrong? What does it actually mean to follow the rules, neutrally applied? And neutrally applied, neither side is behaving anything like statesmen. Neither side is behaving how they should. The Democrats are running an entirely unfair process. They are not doing anything close to what was done during the Watergate hearings or the Whitewater hearings.
Right. And they say that this is going to be the last week of closed-door testimony, but who's even going to show up?
Well, I mean, that's part of the point. They are not running things fairly. They are not letting even the Trump administration know what rules they can operate under to defend themselves. They do say, finally, that the Rules Committee will promulgate rules for once it hits the Judiciary Committee, but they haven't done so yet. And they don't even have a requirement that the Rules Committee give notice. So the Rules Committee could promulgate the rules 1 hour before the hearing starts. That doesn't give the Trump team enough time to prepare a defense. It's a totally unfair process. And look, I've just spent 15 minutes saying that I think what Trump did is definitely serious enough for an impeachment inquiry. That doesn't mean that I support a railroad job, and the Democrats are doing a railroad job, and I'm disgusted with them as well.
So then if this continues to be an illegitimate process, what are House and Senate Republicans to do other than what they're doing?
Well, what they should be doing is acknowledging that the questions raised are serious enough for an inquiry. That doesn't mean they have to say, oh, we're going to go ahead and impeach. It means they have to be honest and say, you know what? This is serious business, and these are serious allegations. They definitely rise to the level of an impeachment inquiry to find out the facts. And they should be up there offering amendments to the process to say, this is how the process should be run. You know what? That's what the Democrats did during the Whitewater-Lewinsky impeachment mess back in September and October of 1998. They didn't like the rules that Speaker Gingrich was pushing, and they offered their own rules. And as it was, 31 Democrats voted for the inquiry, even though they didn't like the rules.
Yes, that's right.
And if they had liked the rules, as many as 100 Democrats said that they would have voted for it. Why can't Republicans now be honest enough to say that if an investigation into perjury about sex was enough for impeachment, then certainly sicking a foreign government on a U.S. citizen with no U.S. investigation is at least worth a probe.
Well, with respect to those amendments, Scalise addressed that with Stephanopoulos, saying they wouldn't accept any amendments from Republicans, that actually there was an effort in that vein, and it was rejected by House Democrats.
They certainly didn't publicize it much. I don't remember them actually formally offering an amendment package on the floor. They would have it taken a lot more seriously if they hadn't spent the entire last 2 months saying that there is absolutely nothing here to see in the first place. I mean, what they should be saying is, yes, these are serious questions, and they deserve investigation, but we got to do it right. Instead, they're saying this whole thing is illegit. They are saying there hasn't even been a question raised that shows that Trump did anything even slightly wrong. And oh, by the way, we don't like your rules. Well, that's not honest. It's just not honest. And so that's why they're not being taken seriously when they talk about having, oh, well, we did want some other rules. They didn't push those other rules. They didn't argue for them. It's just total bunk.
He is Quin Hillyer, contributing editor, National Review, senior editor for the American Spectator, and commentary writer for WashingtonExaminer.com. Quin, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks. And he joined